All right, Austin, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm great.
Sweet. Well, I've been looking forward to this. I know we had to reschedule it once. So let's get right in today. Today's the theme of the show is we're going to get into your real estate journey. How'd you get started? What are you doing in your business today? What's working? What's not working? And then we'll talk about where you want to head in the future. And I know a couple things I've seen you post online are, how to do creative finance deals, which everyone loves to talk about. So we'll definitely cover that today. So before we get into that, how did you get started in real estate, Austin?
Well, I started my company when I was in college at Texas Tech University, and I really wasn't looking to start a real estate business per se. I just wasn't getting everything I wanted out of college, but I didn't want to drop out. And so I was like, I'll just study real estate investing. Maybe I can use it when I'm 40 or 50 and have money, and it'll be a wise thing to do. So I just dove into it, and after about a year to 2 years of heavy research and educating myself, I learned what a lot of people learn, that, you can get into real estate without having a bunch of money or really all that many resources at all to start with. So I started my company when I was, So I was like, let's get going. I had $1,000, which was, I thought I was rich at the time. It was more money than I had ever had. I was always in the hundreds up until that point. So I got $1,000. Let's start a real estate company. So I did that during my senior year at Texas Tech.
Dude, you sound like me. I got started in college with like $2,000 or 2 peas in a pod. That's fine.
Man, you had a big jump start.
double your wealth, right? Double your wealth. I remember I actually spent half of it on training, so I really had 1,000 after that. But interesting. So you got started when you're young. Now let's talk about your first deal. How'd you get your first deal? Because obviously everyone starts, they obviously know that it works because they see it, other people talking about it, but until they do their first deal, nothing really matters.
Yep. So first deal was I actually had 2 deals going at the same time. One of them I put under contract. I didn't sell until after another one. So we'll say I kind of had 2 first deals, but we'll look at the mobile home that I did. I bought it for $3,000, put $1,200 into renovations on it, and it was just a cash deal. So I had my
How'd you find the money for that?
Yeah, my mom invested in that one with me.
There you go.
And which is good because I don't come from a bunch of money. So that small property was within something she could afford to invest in.
Yeah.
And so all in was $4,200 into that mobile home, and then we sold it owner finance and got $3,000 down, $500 a month for 6 years. So after 2 months, it was break even, and then that was all profit from there.
That's unbelievable.
So that was my first deal, and actually just paid it off last year. So
that's funny, man. Was it on land or was it a mobile home in a park?
It was in a park. So I just owned the home, no land with it.
So you basically bought and sold the car.
Kind of.
No, I'm just kidding. But no, that's crazy, bro. I mean, your area is a lot cheaper than my area. I mean, that would never exist in my market. But actually, no, probably not. You're not going to buy a mobile home for $3,000. That's crazy. Is it a single wide or a double wide?
It was a single wide. It was a 1990s model, which I bought a bunch of mobile homes after that, and that turned out to be the newest one that I did. Everything after that was 80s and even some 70s models. So, but it sold for $30,000. That was the price, and then we financed it with interest.
So you found a mobile home that was ultimately worth $30,000 that you bought for $3,000.
Yep.
That's unbelievably awesome. That's a great first deal. I mean, you can't get hurt paying $3,000 for a mobile home. How did you deal with the lot rent while you were renovating it? Did you just pay the lot rent yourself?
I believe on that one, I worked out a deal where I got like 6 months free lot rent or something like that.
Okay.
So I bought it from the park owner. They were just coming through. It was a big company. They were coming through and buying a bunch of mobile home parks, moving in all the homes that they could. And then they didn't really care what happened there. They just needed homes and lots that would eventually pay lot rent. So they weren't actually focused on cash flow or cash. They just wanted homes and lots had a long-term lease in place.
Yeah,
Are they
because
gonna
if
start
you
paying
bring the
6 months from now?
yeah,
Sure.
no, that's smart because if you buy the mobile, I don't do mobile homes, but I'd imagine that you bring the tenant in or the buyer in, and then he's paying you 30 for the property, but then he's also paying the lot rent or she's paying the lot
Right.
rent. Whatever. Yeah, that's a good strategy because the mobile home park guys, they just want the land. They don't want to own the trailers. They don't want those trailers. They just want the person paying the lot rent. So that's interesting, dude. That's really that's a cool first deal. So let me ask you this now. Your market is like, are you in Lubbock, Texas?
Yes.
Okay. So is that West Texas? Where is that?
They call it West Texas. It's pretty much North Texas, but they call it West Texas. So, but it's almost in the middle of Texas and then all the way up at the bottom of the panhandle.
Okay, so you're up there. So you're not that far from what, Oklahoma and Colorado, right?
Right.
Okay.
Few hours drive to get to either of those.
Okay. And then New Mexico can't be that far either.
Yeah, we're like an hour and a half from New Mexico.
Can you drive to like Phoenix or is that too far? Is that that's not like a weekend trip?
It's about 11 or 12 hours. I was actually looking at that since we're
So
going
you
there.
could drive to LA and it's not that far, honestly. You could go to LA and you could probably punch that out in like 18 hours.
Probably. Not that I would want to.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying you're pretty far west. You're a lot far west than I thought. You're like literally past the Midwest. Okay. Anyway, I digress about the geography. Let's get into your business now. You started the business, you did a deal. That's an awesome first deal, by the way. What does your business look like today? Like, we don't have to get into all the details, but like what exit strategies do you look to shoot for? Because a lot of people on this podcast are just talking about making cash offers. They're talking about flipping properties or doing the burst strategy, but all those strategies require you to get a house at a deep discount. So I know you're doing some different stuff.
Right. Yeah, I went shallow and wide with my strategies. So I added a lot of strategies when I was starting out, which I don't recommend to everyone. I recommend if you're getting started I think wholesaling is a great place to focus and start because you have to get good deals. And as you just said, Greg, that's the basis of everything. All these exit strategies we're talking about, unless you just have super deep pockets and you don't care what you pay for a property, you got to get good deals. So that's not how I started. I did some owner financing, mobile homes, flipped houses, wholesale houses, bought rentals. And so doing all that along the way, where we're at today is we have a pretty good sized rental portfolio. We've got some long-term owner finance notes, and then we actively are flipping and wholesaling properties in the interim. I'd say probably about half of what we buy turns into rentals, half of what we buy goes right back out the door as a wholesale or a flip.
Okay. So you're doing a little bit of both. You're doing the cash generating activities, right? Which is, sorry about that. I got a new employee that just started today and I'm making sure, she sets the system up correctly. Anyway, you got the cash generation strategy that everyone talks about. And then you're doing the long-term stuff, the rental properties and the seller financing, right? And this is something there that's very fascinating to the listeners and to me selfishly, is because, listen, I have rentals. I don't have as many as you do. I got a lot of friends in New York, my people, Michael Pinter and whatnot. We have rentals and I just got a tenant out yesterday. It took me 2 years. Okay. 2 fucking years to get it.
That sounds miserable.
I'll say that one more time for the listeners. 2 years, 2720 West Spring Hills. Check it out if you want. Anyway, it's tough to be a landlord in some states. It's tough. Texas is not the case, right? So because of that opportunity in Texas, you can do seller financing, which I want you to cover because this is something that's very appealing to me as a guy who is I would consider myself a tired landlord at this point. I would label I'm a tired landlord. I'm a young, tired landlord. But listen, a lot of those properties, actually all of them, I inherited those tenants. So I kind of walked into that. But can you explain to listeners, what is an owner finance wrap and how does that benefit someone? Because when I heard that strategy and I wrapped my head around it, pun intended, I was like, this is a good idea, So tell the listeners what that is. Because in Texas, that just goes on like crazy.
Yes, we do a lot of it here. I've actually got a good friend I've done business with for pretty much since I got started, so 7 years now, they exclusively do wrap notes and owner financing, and it is a sweet business model. So
You bet it is. You bet it is. That is a
yeah.
great business model. Yeah.
So the way that we do it is basically we buy property. Again, you got to start with a deep discount on the property, and then we'll put some kind of bank financing on it. You could also do this with a private lender if you wanted to, but banks usually give you the cheapest rates. So we put some bank financing on it. We go with a bank that doesn't mind if we do a wrap note on it. That's something I always communicate with my lenders. I don't
What's
want
a
them to
wrap
be
note?
like, hey,
For people who don't know what that is, what can you explain
Yes.
that to like the beginner, the novice?
Yes. So the bank says you can do a wrap note on it. What that is the bank gives us a loan on the property. So we're making them payments every month. And then we sell the property with owner financing. And instead of paying off the bank, we just keep their financing in place, and we do a wraparound mortgage to our end buyer. And so basically there's the bank's loan, and then there's our loan to the end buyer. They make us payments, we make the bank payments.
Okay.
That's in a nutshell what a wraparound note is.
So this is where it's going to get interesting now, because Michael Pinter, I'm going to send him this interview after we actually record today. I'm going to give him a sneak preview. And I was telling him exactly what you just told me. He was talking about, he's like, I got to raise all this private money. And I said, yeah, you can do that. But I said, I'm pretty sure you can find a bank who doesn't give a shit, and you can just do basically a glorified BRRRR. And instead of keeping it as a rental, you just make sure the bank doesn't care or doesn't know that you're wrapping it. And you don't have to get all this private money. You can get short-term private money just to close on the deal. And then you can get those guys out of the deal in 12 months or less. And you can have a credit union on there, and they're probably not going to give a shit, because the bank really just cares that you're paying the mortgage. They don't really care who's in the property. They don't care what's going on in the property. All they care about is they're getting paid, right? So what is the average spread, net spread, between what the what the end buyer is paying you and what you're paying the bank? Like, what is the average spread if you had to kind of guess?
So right now, let's say average rates are 7.5%.
Yeah.
They're somewhere between 7 and 8, depending on the banks I'm working with. Now, when I've done a lot of these, it was cheaper, but let's say that we're getting money at 7.5%. We will sell it on, let's say, 12.5% interest. So about a 5-point spread.
Is that have to do with what interest rates are? So if the rates were in the 3s, then you can't sell it in the 12s, right? You'd have to sell it like 6 points above what the par is. Is that how it works?
Yeah. So if they're in the 3s, you'd get 9%, maybe.
Okay.
So the spread is bigger. Actually, the spread for owner financing, from what I've seen, has gone down slightly, just because lenders are like, we don't want to make it too unaffordable. So you get about 5% interest difference between what you're paying the bank and what you're receiving, but also the amount that you owe the bank is going to be a lot less than the amount that your buyer owes you, because anytime you sell with owner financing, you should be getting a premium on that sales price. You should be getting retail plus some.
Okay, because you're providing financing, so they're going to pay more for the price. Okay.
It makes it much more valuable, just attaching the financing to it.
Interesting. Now, all right. So you're making a spread on the interest at that point. Now, let me ask you this. So this all sounds great. In New York, if I could do this, I wouldn't own any rentals. Actually, I wouldn't be as ambitious to buy as many rentals as I want to buy. Okay. So here, let me just give you because we do have a lot of Northeast people listening to the show. So this is what happens in the Northeast. And I want you, after I explain this, to tell me how it happens in Texas, because I'm sure it's very different. If I have a consumer inside of a property and they have a mortgage, so they own the property, but they're paying the bank. Okay. If they stop paying that mortgage, if they have a good attorney and the law is in their favor, which it usually is, I'm not kidding when you're about to hear this, you could be 10 to 15 years without getting the property back.
Yikes.
Okay. So because of that, you don't do owner financing in New York to other people, because if they file bankruptcy or something happens where they're like the attorney screws up the paperwork, you can get set back for a long time. So there's properties in my market that they've been vacant for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and the bank hasn't done anything yet because the borrower is still fucking around. So in Texas, if you have someone who doesn't pay you, what is a realistic foreclosure timeline, and what does that process look like if that were to happen?
It's a few months. I don't know
Did you
the
say a few
exact.
months?
Yeah. I don't know the exact number of months. I know there are certain notices you need to give to them, but it's pretty much just moves forward like clockwork. Like you need this number of days between this and this notice, and then you can foreclose. So for instance, I had one that I owner financed to them, and they got behind on payments. They caught up. They made big payments. They got behind. It's like the fourth time they're behind on payments. So I said, this is it. We're not going to allow you to get on a payment plan. You either have to pay it all off, or we're going to foreclose on it. And so they're going to be paying it all off. They have it under contract to sell. But
Oh, it's great.
once we told them that, our attorney was able to back it up with that process, and it was already on the foreclosure list to go to auction earlier this month. And only because they had a signed contract by the buyer, we gave them an extra 1 month to make that closing happen before foreclosing on them. So yeah, it's the slower of the processes between eviction and foreclosure. Foreclosure is slower, but it's pretty fast for New York standards, I guess.
Dude, something that I bet you is true in Texas, and I was talking about this with Mike, is that the people in New York know that it's very hard to foreclose. The tenants know it's very, very hard to evict. So when they know that, they understand they have a lot of leverage.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as straightforward to do that because they know they have a couple of years at least, right? Or they know they have at least 90 days in New York, right? So to do an eviction. So this strategy seems like an absolute no-brainer if you're in a state that makes this simple. Texas, Arizona, Nevada, even California, believe it or not, it's a deed of trust state. There's some more problems with California, which how much time do we have, right? But you know, the South. If you're in a state, listeners, that is a judicial state, this is going to be harder, which means the judge has to get involved to foreclose, and it's a full-blown lawsuit. That's like Florida, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts. If you're in a non-judicial state, deed of trust, Texas, Arizona, Oklahoma, even California, you can do this a lot faster. So when you're getting a property, Austin, in your business today, what makes you decide what bucket to put it in, whether it's a real rental, whether it's a seller finance rental, whether it's a flip? Like, how do you make the decision if you're buying most of these properties at a discount? What do you want to keep as a note? What do you want to keep as a rental? Because that's probably a problem you run into a lot.
Yeah, so it was for a while, but for people that know me, they know I try to do something once and for all. And so I try not to just figure this out one time and then the next deal that comes through, I'll figure that one out. I try to create a formula or a system that people on my team can follow that just makes it super simple. And so, you know, we're making hundreds of offers every year and we look at tons of deals. And so I just built out a calculator. It has a flip column and a rental column.
Okay.
And it'll light up green if the numbers are good for a flip over here, or green on the other side if the numbers are good for a rental. And so it's pretty simple. There's lots of numbers that go into that and all that, but at the end of the day, if it's red, it's bad. If it's green, it's good. So
that's good.
So we have a calculator like that. Now, there's a package of properties that I just bought. 23 houses. And so we bought it because it had great equity in it. And that was basically step one. And so for me, every deal has to have really good equity in it for me to buy it. From there, we can decide what we do with it. So some of them we're going to seller finance, and then some of them we're going to keep as rentals.
That makes sense. Yeah, you can have a little bit of both. You can get once again, you go get the cash generated to have the income, and then you take that income and you put it back into the rental. So
yep.
What about this? I'm just using an example here, right? I'm just thinking through this. What is the bank going to give you? Like 80% max? Maybe?
There's some that will do 85%, but yeah, I don't count on that. 80% is a pretty good number.
All right. So it sounds like, and I could be off, so that's why I'm asking. It sounds like if the bank's willing to give you, let's say 80%, 75, 80%. Okay, let's just call it 80 for now. And you know you can sell or finance that at like 105%, right? In that scenario, assuming it's in the right area where it makes sense and the rent's going to be more expensive than the payment, probably a factor. can you technically pay 85% for that house, or 75, 80% for that house? And even with the closing costs, you could still seller finance that out? Because it seems like if that's the case, then you can pay more than most people if you're going to do that strategy, because you're basically just making a spread on the equity and then on the payment.
The technical answer is yes, but don't tell my acquisitions team.
Oh, of course, of course.
Gotta buy it at a big discount. But technically, yes. And so that's where this tool comes in, is that if you do get a deal and it's not selling, so let's say you thought you're buying it at 70% and it actually turns out that it's not selling for that price, you can apply owner financing and all of a sudden this deal will sell, you get the price you want, and you'll have long-term cash flow. So yes, you can pay a little bit more when you're owner financing, but I still try to keep the same discipline for every deal that we get.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You obviously want to get it as cheap as you can, but in the event that you can, yeah, I mean, because it's basically, you want to play with the house money. And then once you play with the house money, how do I have as little of my own money in this deal as possible? That's how I would look at it. Like, so if I know the house or the bank is going to give me 75% loan to value, and I know I can get Rick Jones to do 102% of value, you know, he's going to pay you what? Let's say he pays you $850 a month, and you're paying the bank 700, not 500 a month. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a spread on like what you can get versus what you're going to owe. And that's very interesting. Now, a lot of these tenant buyers, I'm guessing they're doing this because they might not have actually, let me take it back here. Down payments, right? So what do you require for a down payment for something like this? 10%?
At least 10% of the price. Pretty standard.
So you buy a house. Okay. So you sell it for 200, you want 20 grand down, and that down payment's going right into your pocket.
Yep.
Yeah.
Paid someone on the team that sold it, but then the rest of it, goes into the company.
This business model, as I'm thinking about it, is a no-brainer, because you're getting cash now and cash later.
And on top of that, here's the third part that you haven't even considered. Whenever you buy at a good discount and you go to the bank and you get your 80% of ARV loan, if you bought it for less than that, you're getting cash whenever you get it funded at the bank. So you're getting some cash then, you're getting a down payment, and then you're getting cash flow long term.
Yeah, that's true. Because if you refi, I've done this where you get tax-free cheddar and you're like, whoa, that's crazy. Man, this is a great business model. I'm just like low-key jealous, because I mean, I could do this virtually, but I've never even considered it. Huh.
So what I always tell people is, when you're looking at rentals versus creating notes, seller financing, with the rentals, you're going to get the appreciation on the property. So that's awesome over the long term. You're going to get more of the tax benefits, but it's going to be a lot more work, a lot more headaches, and probably less cash flow because of the tenant turnover and the maintenance and all that.
And furnace goes out. Yeah, you got to be responsible for that.
But the seller finance notes, on the other hand, you're more than likely going to have better cash flow, and if not more consistent cash flow.
Yes.
It's going to be very easy once you set it up on the front end. You'll get a chunk of cash now. You're not just going to get monthly payments. But the downside is you don't get the appreciation. Whoever buys it from you gets the appreciation. So that's kind of the trade-off between. And
you don't get the depreciation, because you can't depreciate a house you don't own. So you're going to pay ordinary income. Well, you'll pay whatever income that is. But it's, the way I look at it is like, depreciation is cool. And I've done a bunch of cost segs and it saved me some money. But at the end of the day, like, I look at rentals now where I have a little bit of a jaded view on it, because I've had bad tenants, because I've inherited most of them. Mm-hmm. I look at like the amount of aggravation that goes, and then listen, my state's hard to do an eviction in, so I'm a little fucked up. Yeah. But I look at the brain damage that go, and I'm going to keep buying rentals. I'm not like telling people to not buy rentals in New York. I'm just telling you, get ready for a bruising, right? I look at the aggravation and the liability. And a lot of the times, and I learned this from Michael, if the property doesn't make a real cash flow, you got to just understand that you're not going to get rich off a rental making $200 a month. And listen, I'm not saying don't buy the rental. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to like the listeners. It's like, you're making $200 a month is a step forward. But if people want to like quit their job and like live off their cash flow, I think that's a complete fallacy, unless they're doing seller finance notes or they're making like $500-600 a month net profit on the rentals after you're accounting for some reserves going away for fix-ups. That's where I see that the rentals can really make sense. But a lot of people, including myself, I've bought rentals where even I have one right now. I'm making $187 a month of net cash flow, but I'm really not taking into account for any vacancy and repairs because I renewed the lease with a tenant because I figured, you know what, if they stay here, I don't have to redo the place. They've already been there forever. I feel bad for them, so I'm doing them a favor. I'm still renting it for almost market rent, but that property doesn't make a lot of money. It pays the bills, but I'm not using that $187 to go buy a fucking watch. Like I'm using that money to just stay to like, you know what I mean, to keep the thing going. So,
Right.
But I have other properties that they make like one makes like $600 a month net. The other one makes like $500 a month net. So like it can work, but back to what you were saying is like when you can create a note, which is just a mortgage between you and the end buyer, and they're paying you $1,000 a month, and you truly owe the bank $600 a month. Besides any servicing fees, that profit is going right into your pocket. Because if the toilet breaks, they're not going to call you. If the furnace goes out, they're not going to call you. And if they can't pay, you can evict them. You can foreclose relatively quickly in Texas. So it's a very beneficial business. So if you were like starting over again, you've been in the business now for a while, you've done a bunch of deals, you've become very successful. What advice would you give yourself if you had to start over from scratch, knowing what you know now?
Good question. That's a tough one. I like to put a lot of thought into questions like that. I would say probably the biggest one is to maintain my standards for my team. I don't look at real estate as an individual endeavor. I'm not trying to just build this whole thing by myself. I've been very intentional about building a business and creating opportunities for other people to come in and be a part of it and build things for their life. And so there were times starting out where I didn't uphold my standards. I thought I needed to make an exception for someone, and I should have just kept the standards, because at the end of the day, either I'm going to give in to them, or it's going to come to a head where the standards have to be upheld, but you've wasted time with having not the right person in that seat in your company.
No, that's great advice.
I'd say that's probably the biggest thing.
Like almost justifying why someone else can't meet the standard. And they're either going to keep performing like shit, or you're going to have to can them. And it's like, if you have that standard to begin with, this is the baseline and this is the minimum. And in order to stay around here, you have to be at your baseline, which is our standard, whatever that might be, calling people back right away, being consistent, whatever that benchmark might be. That's a great piece of advice for people, because a lot of people get comfortable and they get cozy, including yours truly. You know what I mean? And they're not willing to have a conversation with somebody and stay on top of people, right? I think a big way to prevent that is hiring the right people to begin with.
That's right.
And not even really caring that much about like, oh, this is how you do the job. This is how you call people back. This is how you underwrite. This is how you do that. It's like, is this person have good character, and do they have a good work ethic? And then can I train them on the actual real estate versus, oh, this person's really good on the phone, but they're a basket case to deal with like personally, and they're just always doing something. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, that's a great piece of advice. I wish I knew that too. I actually, my team's really good. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I've been picky with hiring people because of that reason, right? I've had bad hires. Don't get me wrong. And I've made mistakes, and everyone will make mistakes. That's a great piece of advice, man. So let's get into a little bit more on the seller financing. I think this is a real big talking point. I think people really are going to get a value from this because they might have never heard this before. So you're doing these wraparound mortgages. Are you guys doing owner subject to transactions where you're taking over a payment from a seller? Have you guys ever done that?
We do, but we keep those as rentals just because I'm sure there are ways to do it, but I don't want to be the one that's saying, all right, we're going to take over your payment, but we're going to transfer the title to someone else. We're not going to pay you off, and the loan's going to stay in your name. And they're going to pay us, and we'll pay you, and then you'll pay the bank.
Peter will pay Paul, who'll pay Robert, who'll pay Stacy, who will pay John, who will get fucked, No, I don't.
So it's just hard to explain that. When something's hard to explain, I don't want to have to convince people. So on subject to, we just keep them as rentals.
All right. That's fair enough. And I agree with I agree with that 100%. Now let's get into subject to, because this is where I've had some issues. And this might be a limiting belief, right? Probably is. Most things are. In my experience, Austin, I have swung at 25 pitches in subject to. And in New York, they're not really relevant. This is more for out-of-state stuff I've done.
Okay.
I have found, right, and I actually was about to buy a subject to this week, but I had to cancel the deal because the thing didn't make cash flow after I looked at the numbers again, right? And that's a lesson. Do your homework, ladies and gentlemen, because if you buy a subject to, and you sign on the dotted line and you're responsible for paying the loan and the thing doesn't rent out for it should be, you're going to be cruising for a bruising, as they say.
Yep.
I found that besides that one where it was kind of easy, but I ultimately didn't close it, I found the subject to would be a very hard sell for a seller because they're basically taking a leap of faith that you're going to make their mortgage payment. Most likely they're in financial trouble, most likely, not all the time, but mostly. And I've found that to be a very difficult sale compared to just taking a discount on your house in an equity deal, right? What have you found? Like what seller avatar do you see being the most receptive to the subject twos? Because I've found that sellers, they don't understand it. They think it's shady, even though it's not. They don't feel comfortable because the loan is still in their name. I've found it to be really kind of murky, and I've not had a lot of sellers be that receptive to it. Like we've almost signed a contract and they're like, you know what? I think I'm actually just going to do something else with it. I don't think I want you making my mortgage payment. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I
don't think subject to is as strong of an offer as many other things you can offer them.
I agree with you 100% there, dude.
I think it's one of the weakest offers you can give. That being said, we've only done a few of them really, because what ends up normally happening is they'll just owner finance it to us. We won't take over their mortgage. And so they have a little bit more control there. But we've done a couple. We're under contract on one right now. And so on the ones that do go through, it's just because of the trust. That's the only reason they pick us. Like we have one under contract right now where it makes zero logical sense that they would sell to us. They had other offers for $10,000 more, all cash. And they're in a financial bind, but they decided to do subject to allow us to take over their mortgage at a $10,000 lower price. And they get nothing at closing. They don't get any money until we pay it off by selling or refinancing. So they were going to get a bunch of cash from these other people. They're going to get nothing indefinitely for anywhere between 1 and 10 years from us. But it was the trust that my acquisitions manager developed with the seller that made them want to work with us. Basically, they trusted him, even though, in my opinion, subject to is not that strong of an offer when there are other options available. It's kind of the one that, like, okay, seller, you understand that everyone's offers have come in for less money than what you owe the bank. No one can pay what you owe the bank. So here's how we can do it. We can take over the loan. That's where I see it fitting in. But sometimes they just have such a deep level of trust with you that it'll work when other options are still there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because if they don't trust you, they're certainly not going to let you make their loan payments. Yep. Even though in Texas, it is a little bit easier to get out of trouble because you can sell it faster and, they can technically, if they did a wraparound, there's a whole bunch of mechanical stuff, but yeah, I see what you're saying there. And I like how you just keep that as a rental, because then you're paying that mortgage and you're getting rent and et cetera. And the benefit to sub to, though, I'll say this, when it works out, you're taking over a loan you didn't have to qualify for. It's probably going to be, at least whoever's listening to this in 2023, it's probably an interest rate that's lower than market.
Yep.
And you can generally get into a deal for little to no money. And, you can help a seller out, because the truth is, if let's say they have zero equity in the property, maybe they're upside down a little bit, maybe by 5 or 10 grand. If it still makes a cash flow and you can keep it, who really cares how much equity is in there? Obviously, I'm not saying go buy a house underwater that's like a disaster, but like, let's say the thing's on a 30-year mortgage and they're 5 years in. It'll be a good deal in 25 years. You know what I mean? So I think it's a good tool to have in the tool belt. I just see a lot of people talking about it where it's like every deal I do is subject to it. I'm like, well, show me the HUDs because I don't buy it.
You probably don't do too many deals then.
Yeah, I just don't see it being, I see it being a really good tool in the tool belt and I see it working out real well, but I can't see that being a 3, 4, 5 deal a week kind of strategy unless you're buying nationwide, right? From other people. Cause another thing with sub 2 that I've thought about is like the seller usually is in a jam and they have no money or else they're going to put it on the market or whatever, or no equity. And you have to look at it as a buyer, even if they trust you. Is this really going to benefit that person? And a lot of the times it is because if they're going to get foreclosed and they're going to get shot, their credit's going to be toasted. If you can catch their loan up and stuff, it will benefit them.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people, they might not disclose, oh, well, this loan's going to be in your name for 10 years. That's going to probably show up on your credit. Is that something you'd be open to? Or because I think a lot of people can pull the wool over people's eyes if they don't disclose what's really going on. And if the seller knows exactly what's going on and they decide it's the right thing for them, I think it's a great strategy. I really do.
Yep.
Interesting. No, I love that, man. Now let's cover the last pillar and then we'll start to wrap the show up here. I could talk about this for hours, as you can tell. Owner financing when there's no mortgage involved. Let's say you reach a homeowner and they want a bunch of money for the house. They're not taking a discount, but they'd be willing to seller finance you the property. What's your experience with doing transactions like that in Texas?
We've done many more of those than subject to deals. We've done quite a few seller finance deals. So you can limit their risk sometimes by getting a bank note. So you're buying it, the bank wants you to put 20% down, they'll loan you 80%, and the seller will finance that 20% for you. So you're still buying at zero down, even paying higher prices, which I only do on some multifamily, mobile home parks, things like that is where that structure has worked really well for us. But other than that, if it's just a single family home, then most of the time there's going to be some level of repairs needed. There's a ton of repairs needed. I don't do this strategy because that's so much money out of my pocket to fix it. But if it's just a small amount, you have to build the trust, but you just tell the seller that your money's going to go into maintaining the property, fixing these things that you both know need to be fixed. And so, most of the time you'll give a down payment, but those are for really nice houses that need nothing done to them.
Yeah.
So for me personally, with our company, we don't offer down payments on seller financing. We'll do either one of those two structures. Either the bank will loan us most of it and they'll carry back a small portion, or the seller would just finance 100%. So it's always the saying is, if it's our price, your terms, that means we'll close as quick as you want with cash. But if it's your price, it's our terms. So we're doing it on payments, no money down, that sort of thing.
Dude, I say the same thing to people. It's so funny you say that. I'll give you my one and only so far owner finance experience in California. So where was that? That was on Starlight Way in Julian, California. It was actually a vacant piece of land on the side of a mountain. The guy wanted 25 grand or 30 for it. This is a vacant lot. It was like a piece of a mountain, right? Like literally the thing, there was houses around it, but middle of nowhere. And I said, I'll give you 25,000. I'll give you 5 down. You finance 20 grand over 60 months. I didn't even say the I word, which is interest. There wasn't even brought up.
Yep.
We closed the deal and I sold it afterwards. If I knew what I do now, I would have seller financed that to someone else, but I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, oh, I got to get rid of this property. But if you don't ask, the answer is always no. Right. And that opened my eyes, and it was actually a pretty easy deal. Like it wasn't really that big of a problem to close. So that's a good strategy. Like if the bank's willing to give you 80 and then the seller takes back 20, like they're going to get most of their money up front. So they're going to be happy as a clam. And then they're going to finance 20% of a $200,000 property. It's like, depending on if you're doing bigger deals, but yeah, it's a win-win, because in that way, they're not taking this huge hit on cap gains. They're going to take most of the hit, but then they're going to take their 20% down as like a slow little drip of taxes, because they're going to create a mortgage or a deed of trust in your state. And I think it's a good lesson for people. It's like, listen, if they want their price, it's on your terms, i.e. a lot of money. You can still pay market value for the property if it makes profit, or if it's, their price? No, their terms, your price. So if they want to close in 2 weeks, okay, well, it's going to be at 65 cents on the dollar and I can make that happen for you. So you always want to let the seller know what the, what the alternative is. Like what's the
Yep.
pros and cons? How does it teeter? So it's funny, like we've made this in New York. We've like tried to do this like with sellers to like have them seller finance us. And I've came close on a few, but what ultimately ended up happening, and this is a Northeast problem, and it still works, but the seller's attorney gets in their ear because the seller has an attorney, and they're like, this guy's going to put 10 grand down. You're selling this thing for 400 grand. What on earth? And then they're like, no, we're not doing this because they know how hard it is to foreclose. Right. So it's like, I had one multifamily. I was close to buying it. I'm actually glad I didn't buy it because COVID happened right after that. And who knows what fucking went down with that thing. But the seller's attorney was like, no way. And then he had a mortgage on it. So we would have to wrap the mortgage. It was like this whole thing. And I was like, forget about it. But what was that? What was that guy's name? Pete McCarthy was the seller's name. I remember the guy, nice guy. I actually know his son. So it was pretty funny. But that deal didn't work out. But the takeaway for the listeners is if their price, your terms, their price, your terms, your price, their term. Wait, say it again.
That's right. You got it. You got it.
There you go. Their price, your terms, your price, their terms. That's right. That's how you do it. So let's get into like, what do you got going in the future? Where do you want your company to be at? Like, what's your kind of vision for everything? Obviously you're really doing well in Texas, and it's awesome to see, a fellow young guy crushing it, as they would say. So what does the future look like for you, Austin?
Well, we're just operating in Lubbock, Texas, and there's some small towns that are pretty close to us. So that's where our business is. And I intend to stay focused until we take over Lubbock. So first goal will be the number one home buyers here. Yeah. That's our first goal, is be the number one home buyers in Lubbock. And then once we achieve that, our next goal is to be the number one home buyers in Lubbock by such a wide margin that you don't have to go count how many properties everyone did. Everyone just kind of knows. And so that's our second goal. Once we hit that, then we might look at some other markets. But we're just kind of sticking to the plan, sticking to the same model that I've had for years now, buying discounted properties. It's not just houses though. Like I alluded to earlier, we've got some mobile home parks. Love those. Small multifamily, and then lots of houses. So last year we did 50 houses. We bought another 19 mobile homes, move into our park. But we're looking to at least double that this year. And already off to a raging start so far. We've closed on quite a few houses this year already in 2023. So just keeping it running, fine-tuning the business model, and pulling the right levers at the right times to keep it a great business and keep growing. That's what we're doing.
That's awesome, bro. You're smart for going deep, not going wide. I see a lot of people. They're doing like 2 deals a month in a market. They're like, oh, I'm ready to go to the next market. I'm like, what are you going anywhere else? You did 2 houses a month, and do you think your market's tapped out? Like, what are you, crazy?
So this is some good wisdom, or at least it's my opinion. I'll call it wisdom for people considering that, because I thought about going elsewhere. I have roots in Houston, Texas, and thought about growing an arm there or somewhere else. And what I see is that people expand into new markets for 2 reasons. One reason, which is the right way, in my opinion, is you've unlocked all of the potential that you have in your market. You've got your market share. You've kind of maxed out the business, so to speak.
Yeah.
You're operating at
Marketing
such a high level.
diminishing at that point.
And then you need more markets. That's the right way. That's how I want to do it. The other way, I see a lot of people, like you just described, kind of get going just a little bit, and then they don't have that much success because other people are just better at whatever business they're in. They're not elite at their craft yet. And then so they want to jump into another market just so they can hit whatever number of deals that they want to do.
Stupid. Yeah,
so I want to be the first type of person, not the second. So
I love it. No, it's true.
Discipline with that for sure.
Dude, that was so well said, because the only reason I'm in 2 markets right now is because my acquisitions guy physically lives in Delaware and he can go on appointments. That's it. If he didn't live in Delaware, I would not be doing business there, right? That's the facts, right? But he's there, he's local, it makes sense. We have a quicker cash conversion cycle there because there's no like bullshit with attorneys. So it's just, it makes sense to do that. But I see too many people saying, oh, I'm going to wholesale in Cincinnati, and then I'm going to go into Kansas City, and then I'm going to go into Las
Right.
Vegas. It's like, listen, you can do all that. More power to you, but you might as well get really good in Cincinnati. And then you go into Kansas City whenever you feel like you've maxed out your market. Like I got a friend in Washington, and he lives here, but he does business in Washington. And he's like, dude, I'm going to, because he got an office in San Diego. And I'm like, oh, are you going to start doing deals here? And he's like, hell no. He's like, I'm going to go max out Washington, but we're just going to do it from San Diego. I said, hell yeah, that's awesome. So the lesson is go deep, not wide, and max your market out. Even if you're in a small market like Austin, there's a ton of freaking, like in any small market. I mean, there's a guy, my friend Eric Brewer, he's in like York, Pennsylvania, which is like, where the hell is that? Pennsylvania. And he's crushing it in a small market because he goes deep in that market versus trying to be the king of the Northeast or whatever it is, or the king of Pennsylvania. Right. So take that lesson. That's $1 million lesson, listeners, you just got for free. So Austin, if people want to check you out, follow you, see what you got going on, what's the best way for people to plug in with you, bro?
Personally, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can search my name. And then our company website has some different places to go for sellers, or if you want to invest in some deals with us, it's thundersunhomes.com.
Thundersunhomes.com. I love that because you got a lot of thunderstorms and you got a lot of sun in Texas.
That's right.
So you got that. Cool. And then we'll get you on LinkedIn, and we'll put all that in the show notes. Is there an email address if people want to reach out to you directly without fucking around on LinkedIn? Do you have an email you want to share with them just in case they want to get to you quick?
You can do Austin@thundersunhomes.com.
Beautiful. AUSTIN at thundersun.
SUN.
Yeah, I almost said Thunderstorm Homes.
Yep, you got it.
Cool. Austin, I appreciate you taking some time out to do this interview, my friend. I'm really impressed with you. I genuinely mean that. You're doing great stuff, and it's exciting to see where you'll be at in the future, my man. So thanks for doing the interview, and I'll catch you soon.
Thank you. Appreciate you too, Greg.